Oops. Hadn't even added myself to the stage. Rookie mistake. Look at, we already got Mr. Jess here. Came to hang out at the very tail end of yesterday's stream. And then, we couldn't hang out and talk more. All right, what do we start with here? Do we do the Luke Thompson woo woo woo? The like Kalepa Salt Bay with woo? Or do we do little baby Luke likes Budweiser? Both are good. But let's go. Maybe I should have entitled this. Maybe I, you dead. Narcissism. What makes one a narcissist? Deep, profound questions. I was going to make more branding. I have more branding, but I don't have it ready today. I forgot about it because I was too excited about other things. But let's start with, what are we starting with? Where'd it go? Where did my, oh, there it is. Okay, I gotta stop it before it does it again. So, few things I want to talk about today. Let's lay it out. I was just gonna title it "Just Want to Stream." Just want to stream, man. This is related to what I talked about on the last stream, but also on what is the TLC? How do you get involved? What are the steps of this online community? How do you prescribe it? Should it be explicit or should it be implicit? What are the strengths and weaknesses of it being explicit versus it being implicit? Communities have spoken rules. They have unspoken rules. I don't know how you can get around that. That's just the nature of the beast. But I was watching. See, my wife knows this about me. There was another example of it the other day. What came up? Oh, it was that I've used this example many times, but like I'm not a technical person in many ways. I use words. See, again, this is potato. Some people would say flippantly. Some people would say creatively or really practically. Like, is it the wrong word if it works? If the goal is communication, how important is it that you use the right word? Does the right word lead toward proper and true and good communication, or just a preferred kind of communication? All interesting questions. All interesting. Very interesting. How long can I talk like this? But one of the things that, like I said to my wife once when I was going out to get snow off of the driveway, and I was like, I gotta go back in the driveway. And this happens all the time in my marriage. And my wife, she'll go like, what? What are you talking about? The words that you're using don't make sense. Sense making. Meaning. What is meaning? Communication. The meaning crisis. And my response usually is like, when I was more immature, I would say just immediate frustration. But that has evolved into a kind of understanding. This is gonna tie back into the Rigel and Ethan Kahi stream, because it's spiral dynamics. It's evolution of consciousness. It's Daniel and Nate's conversation of the spiral and the Ouroboros. and repentance and evolution and change and growth and how that happens. Because previously in my life, it's also related to the Tim Keller thing or whatever I was saying. I think I said this to Ben Job most recently, but I realized at 20, I was an idiot at 10. Well, maybe not then. I realized at 30, I was an idiot at 20. Then at 40, I realized I was an idiot at 30. And you have this constant progression. It's growth, perhaps. Growth in consciousness. And so I said I was going to vacuum the driveway, and my wife is confused. And I, in my immaturity, earlier on in our marriage, things like that would happen, and I would just be like, are you just interpreting my words completely devoid of the context? Because if I say, I'm going to go vacuum the driveway, okay, what's going on right now? In our world, what is going on right now? It's winter. There's snow. We have a garage. We have to drive out of it. I am the person who shovels the driveway most of the time. Use time. I shovel the driveway, so use time. And so then I'm thinking like, basically, I think the way I've realized this is kind of the way that my mind works is that I see it's the particular word doesn't really matter to me as long as because like I'm not trying to do it. I think ahead of my head. I speak ahead of my head a lot of times. That's part of my whole shtick, going off script. I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know. I haven't thought about it beforehand. I'm just talking. And so then when I go to vacuum the driveway, she's confused, but I'm just like, what's the difference? Vacuum it, shovel it. And she's like, there's a difference. This is like a lot of my conversations in the TLC. This is like, I feel like Nick and Free Willing and I have been talking about this recently. Sorry, Jed. Now I have to get a new pencil. That was like theatrical. I gotta find something else to write with. Jed made me do it. Why do you make me do that, Jed? Look at this is anti-creation. Okay. So I shoveled the driveway. This came up the other day. I was making hamburger, ground beef, and I was doing it to make like beef stroganoff. I don't know what that is, but it's like a mushroom soup based. You can do like a soup, which I make at home from scratch. And you do that. You have noodles, or you can do zucchini noodles. You can do not wheat noodles, but I was making that. But I'm making like a vegetarian version, and I'm making a meat version. But I just say like and I said to my wife like putting the roast beef in the thing or whatever, and not hamburger helper, my friend. And I was like, I'm putting the roast beef in the thing. She's like, what? And I'm just like, the hamburger, the ground. Okay, and here's the thing. This is the polysemy of words. I didn't know I was going to reference this, but I often do. The Ted S. Arkansas. Seabacks. Number one, Seabacks, I haven't seen you in the comments recently. I don't know what the hell you're doing, but it sure as shit ain't watching my videos and it's not commenting. And you're going to miss things like Arkansas. Do you want to miss that? Do you want to be left out in the cold, alone, freezing, dying in isolation? Or do you want to participate and hear things like Arkansas? The Ted S. Arkansas Convivium, where he's talking about inscapes. Gerard Manley Hopkins and Shelley, and that's why you get +2 bonus throws on your saving throws on Grim Grizz's channel. This is going to be a new shtick that I do. This is going to be a new thing. Grim wants to call me a narcissist. Me. He wants to call me. Me, a narcissist. Number one, he's making people alcoholics. How does he feel about that? You done fucked up. And sorry, also, I'm sorry for swearing, but God, I'm glad to see you. Super glad. That's great. We're gonna get into a video. We're gonna play some Peugeot and Nathan Jacobs podcast. But first, did I finish my thought? Oh, roast beef and hamburger. This is the flexibility of words, right? So go check out the Ted S. Gerard Manley Hopkins Inscapes thing. As far as just like academic conceptual content in the TLC, that it's maybe on my Mount Rushmore. I talk about it all the time. It's very good. I don't even know how many views it has. Subtle. That's like shadow matriarchy stuff right there, Grim. Just say what you're doing. Okay. All right. Shadow patriarchy. So words are flexible, right? So we have roast beef, then we have hamburger. If I'm browning ground beef in a pan, and I'm browning that, is it hamburger? Some people call that hamburger, but is that really a hamburger? What is a hamburger? This may seem like, I don't know. What would people call it? Like stupid word things, but like words work this way. The reason people debate and talk about the nature of words and what words mean and all that kind of stuff is because we have misunderstanding about words. And people don't, and meaning isn't a one-to-one equivalence. That's the summary of that TED S thing. Language and words do not have a one-to-one equivalence. And this is to the George MacDonald. The other thing I love to quote, Malcolm Guite doing the George MacDonald. He's speaking on his imagination essay. I got too excited, and my tongue was just like, "You're excited. Where are you going?" And but words are art. He says art and language isn't so much to convey a meaning as it is to awaken a meaning. Because we're sowing seeds, kids. If you're in the conveying meaning, you're probably in the information economy and in the ideological economy, and you probably feel a deep bodied need to close the deal to get people to accept the right ideas. And so this is what we're going to play with a little bit in this clip. I'm just going to, the Rigel, spiral dynamics, Rigel in the quest for the holy Techne, Ethan thing. I just want to show it because I'm plugging it. Plugging away. I'm like an electrician. I'm plugging things so much. That's all Nick Freerillian does, really. He's like an electrician. He doesn't do anything technical. He just like, they only hire him. He just like plugs and unplugs things at his company. He told me that because they don't trust him to do anything else. All right, we're gonna share this. So this is the Rigel. Look at, and we have on the side, we have UFC stuff coming up because we got fights this weekend, kids. We got fights, and then we also have food shorts. Listen, this is the side. This is my little Chris Howard section of the live stream. Got some Rick Glassman because I watch Rick Glassman a lot. I've been talking about his conversation with Chris Williamson, which is excellent. Which is, I tried to make a short this morning that was related to that. Like, when is lying and truth telling? How do you tell the difference? Christ and Antichrist are a hair's breadth. Bingo. Also drink. When you watch a stream of mine, there's a bingo card that Matt C made, which I should be able to pull that up at any time, of the Luke Thompson bingo card, which evolves a little bit. It's part of the spiral. So you can drink that, or you can drink anytime I say I or me or any personal pronoun. Because we all know, listen, let's say this to begin with too. We all know it's better to speak in third person. It's less narcissistic to speak in the third person than the first person. To speak as if you see objective reality truly, and you don't reference that the necessary embeddedness that your interpretive lens has to reality. There's more humility with that. Am I right? That was just for fun. because he's always wishing people well. God, you gotta love this guy. Sever recession? Severe. I think you mean severe. See, like this is the kind of thing. It's like, do you have the kind of creativity where you can see through things? That's part of iconic vision, I think. Is like, I think Jed here has a typo. Like sever. See, your mind can go many places here. It's just like, what is sever? Sever recession? What is he even talking about? What is that? Oh, I bet he meant severe because you're filling in the gaps. Do you think like an AI where this does not compute? Or do you have the kind of imagination that can see many possibilities? How creative are you? Are you a human being or are you AI? Sartori's been talking about this stuff recently. All right, let's get into the first. Well, this might be the only clip. Was I going to do 2 clips? I can't remember. We're going to share. We're going to share the screen and we're going to do this. Now, this video is called How Do You Know, oops, hide current comment. Are you even real? There's a really great, who sings that song? James Blake. I think it's called Are You Even Real? Wonderful song. Not really about whether or not you're human or not. I think it's just about like being really into someone. God, I love this song. And it's a very sensual song. It's like a poppy, electronic, modern Marvin Gaye type vibe. But it's just like, man, you're great. Are you even real? I think that's the general vibe of the song. Okay, but it's great. But or you could do the Billie Eilish song. Do people like Billie Eilish? My daughter does. I like some Billie Eilish songs, but the Barbie song, the end of that song, what's the name of that song? Are You Real? I think that's the thing. A sever ascension. More severing of information. Ooh, look at Paul Allen's being creative. Are we human or are we dancers? What's the difference? Is there a difference? Is that a distinction without a difference, my man? Butterscotch? I'll take it. Soft nougat and butterscotch core. That's true. Yeah. My daughter knows what I think about many things, and she, that's it. Yeah. What was I made for? It's a great question. All right. Let's get into this video here. Do I need, okay.
Protestantism, there is a tendency toward penal substitution. So I think about...
Okay, here's the thing. I want to caveat this. I'm already pausing it. Very like, you can just go watch the whole thing uninterrupted if you want. I'm commenting on it, and I'm going to pause it sometimes. This gets, I'm going to have, I would quibble with some of the words that are being used in this. Like, for example, objective. I don't like the word objectively true. And again, Nathan Jacobs has a PhD in philosophy, I believe. He's taught a lot. He knows structural academic definitions and technical stuff and the history of all this stuff much better than me. And yet, I I'm still gonna say I don't like that word. I would like the understanding of that word to evolve and change. So there's going to be words in here and things and topics that are contentious, that we maybe feel deep, that we feel identity connections to. Like some people really, I know this from like, I did the, I've talked about like piece of shit theology. Penal substitutionary atonement is a topic that comes up a lot, where it's like, what do you mean by that? Is the penal substitutionary atonement that you don't believe in, is that one that I also don't believe in? To quote the great Rob Bell, like, tell me about the God you don't believe in. I maybe don't believe in him either. What do we mean when we're talking about God? This goes all the way, very deeply Jordan Peterson lore and the history of the TLC. So And here I want to say penal substitutionary atonement is not the same thing as substitutionary atonement. It's a subspecies. It's a type of substitutionary atonement. I would say that pretty much all Christians believe in substitutionary atonement. But then it's like, what do you mean by that? And some people mean penal, which is a very particular thing. Dad therapist. But this video gets at a lot of things that I like. I don't like objective. I like the term personalist because I think you get all the things that you want to get with objective without the baggage with personalist. If you understand what a person is, which is a integrated unitive relation filled of many different relations rather than the isolated autonomous individual. Okay, let's go back. My main thing is like be able to listen, be able to hear the thing behind the thing. Don't lose the meaning for the myopia of the particular words. Don't get caught up in semantics. Don't get caught up in endless debates about language, although we kind of do that. Try to be doing the further up, further in thing.
God primarily as a judge. I think about the human condition primarily as a lawbreaker. And I think about the gospel primarily as Jesus is taking a punishment for my sins to get me off the hook, right? Yeah. Something like that. And yet, if I'm talking to the Eastern Church Fathers, they don't have that concept. They have a very different concept where I am a broken and a dying species, and Christ, who has the life of God in himself, enters our species in order to heal it and repair it. Now let's go to something rather.
Now here's those are different things. One is a judicial legislative frame, which elevates moralism to a kind of absolute, although including other things, but like that's the whole point of the penal, which here's a little aside. Apparently like our local, our like parental Wi-Fi thing, my wife got a notification the other day because my daughter at school, I think she had homework that had something to do with like, it was probably close to this. It was probably penal substitutionary atonement or something like that. But she looked up the word penal and it got a little, this is how dumb we are. We're just like, listen, parental filter, our kids are smart enough to know the difference between penile and penal. Okay. And also if a kid's trying to look at pictures of penises and they type in penile, I think you just reward them with that. I mean, good on you for knowing penile. Okay, back to the video. But like, there is a difference between he who has life entering into a broken world to give it life. That's a different frame than a merely judicial punishment thing.
Simple. So if you look at the story of, the leper who gets healed by Christ, and then Christ tells him to go and make, a sacrifice or give the offering that, that Moses prescribed as a testimony to them, right? The people who are going to receive this of his healing in order to sort of point back toward Christ. If you dig up like what the specific sacrifice that the leper is supposed to offer in this context, it actually involves two birds, and you take one and you kill it, and the blood of the one ends up, going on the other, and then the one that's been bloodied ends up being released. And I know immediately that a Protestant is going to see in that penal substitution. That's their theology, right? They're like,
okay, here's the thing, right? So this is very important. He says, I know immediately that, I mean, I don't know if he said Protestant, but like, I don't know if it's as broad as Protestant, but it's definitely a lot of Calvinist leaning Reformed. I'll just speak from like the culture that I came out of, young, restless, and Reformed, Baptist, Bros, Calvinists. For sure, they will see that and they will read into it penal substitutionary atonement. Now, here's the thing. That's a narrative, interpretive, philosophical structure that then you are imputing into the text. Technically, that's called eisegesis. It's not exegesis, it's eisegesis. But it also is showing that you have to have some sort of philosophical framework to interpret anything. Context, your own personal radical subjectivity, maybe context is you can't divorce that into a third-person objective monarchical vision, because it's that damn I.
Like, see, this one's Jesus who gets killed. I get doused in the blood, so it looks like I've been killed, and I get let loose and freed.
Give me the blood. Give me the blood. That's a There Will Be Blood reference, which is one of the movies that I talked about with Risto last night at Town Hall Brewery in Minneapolis. Super old, chill, cool little brewery. As we hung out with his friend and discussed movies. Give me the blood. Okay.
Right? But if you look at Cyril of Alexandria, when he looks at that, what he sees is something different. He says, oh, these represent the two natures of Christ, one of which he took on and is subject to death, and one of which is immune to death because it's from heaven and it's divine. And so this is a picture of the two natures of Christ, him being, slain and yet not dying because, he's divine.
So, right? So Paul, here, you say there are plenty of PSA sacrifices in the Old Testament. Or are there? That's the whole question. That is not automatic. And this is what Dr. Jacobs, PhD, expert. You have to believe him. He has a PhD. But this is what he's saying, is just like that interpretation wasn't in Cyril of Alexander. Right? Was that who he mentioned? Cyril of Alexander? Let's go back and mention it, because he was saying he looked at that and saw something different. This is also very much Vervaeke's cup. At what angle are we looking at it from? What is your situatedness? What you see in here depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. I've experienced this so many times. People will read a text and they'll be like, look, that's penal substitutionary atonement. And I'm like, or is it? Or people will look at a text with, this happens with hell all the time. And people are like, look, eternal conscious torment. Look, obviously. And I'm like, not necessarily. You're assuming a conveyance of, you're still in an information economy. You're assuming a conveyance of information in a one-to-one, non-interpretive, non-personal understanding of language, which I would say has no basis. Is a faith position that I think is completely untethered from reality. It's like there's no good reason. It's a faith-based position, I think, without any substantive reason behind it. Let's go back and listen to what he said and keep going.
And so he sees is something different. Alexander been killed, and I get let loose and free. That's their theology, right? And you take one and you kill it, and the blood of the one ends up, going on the other, and then the one that's been bloodied ends up being released. And I know immediately that a Protestant is going to see in that penal substitution. That's their theology, right? They're like, see, this one's Jesus who gets killed. I get doused in the blood, so it looks like I've been killed, and I get let loose and freed, right? But if you look at Cyril of Alexandria, when he looks at that, what he sees is something different. He says, oh, these represent the two natures of Christ, one of which he took on and is subject to death, and one of which is immune to death because it's from heaven and it's divine. And so this is a picture of the two natures of Christ, him being, slain and yet not dying because, he's divine. And so in this sense, right, the theology that the person has a deep impact on what they see in those, even when they're sticking close to the text. They think they're sticking closer to the text than they maybe are, right? They don't realize how much of their own tradition they're bringing to the text. But it does seem that the sort of story or the sort of theology or the sort of philosophy a person has in their mind will produce a lens, right, or a skew or something like that affects what you see in the story. And so I suppose part of the question is, when it comes to symbology and things like that, do the symbols, I'm not even sure how exactly to formulate the question, because it's almost like a chicken and the egg sort of tension that's there in terms of, is the theology first and then the symbols and the theology, the reciprocal relationship. I trust you get the problem that I'm identifying.
So let's formulate it in a way that's very practical for people to understand. This is the way I like to discuss it, is that I invite two people into my house, right? One of them is someone.
I like this illustration because it's very, this is why I like to talk about hospitality and inviting things into your home, because I think the fractal pattern, the bigger level fractal patterns that we see and people try to apply at, say, scale, it's the difference between growth and scale probably, and vertical versus horizontal, but like the illustration of the house and the family and the spouse and the wife and the kids and like those dynamics and invite insider, outsider, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same stuff. All right. This is a good illustration.
People into my house, right? One of them is someone who is a friend and cares for me. And the other person, I don't know, but the other person is a thief, right? And so these two people enter into my house. And so they will organize my house very differently. That is, the way that they will perceive the structure of my house will be completely different, with all the same facts, with all of the same things there. One of them will be looking at, when other people aren't noticing, what's a way out, is that window locked, and will organize a thief's vision of my house. And that vision will be completely coherent to the purpose of the thief, right? And like I said, like my friend or my family member will have a very different experience of the same house. Now, the question is there a objective hierarchy of worlds? Is there an objective hierarchy of goods in which?
See, I'll quibble. I don't like the word objective. Is there a real, existent? You could say it this way, independent of your opinions about it. I wouldn't ever say independent of your participation or your acceptance of it, because I think everything is connected. But your opinions can be delusions. Like, that's probably the difference. But I don't like objective. Okay, back. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt you, Jonathan. I apologize.
It's hierarchy of worlds. Is there an objective hierarchy of goods in which some worlds yield more reality than others? And that's the biggest question. And so, if you look at, let's say, some of the ideological captured people that we see politically now, their worldview is completely coherent. It has a type of coherence that is, they organize their world in a certain way that yields certain fruits. But
the reason I like this clip is it connects so many things. Like that. They see a set of facts in a certain way, given their constraints and their context, that coheres and makes sense of their world so that they can do certain things, so they can act in the world. It's very practical and pragmatic. This is all the stuff that Daniel, O.G. Rhodes, has been talking about with Gödel points, right? And they're internally coherent systems. These people have an internally coherent system. These people have an internally coherent system. It works for whatever they're doing until it doesn't. Perhaps, Jed. But like I'm gonna explain why in a little bit. But then how do we work across two different internally coherent systems without people just saying like, well, mine works, and so whatever. I'm not even going to try to bridge other things because this one just works. How do we have unity and multiplicity, pluralism? This is all of that stuff. So he's connecting a lot of dots. Okay, back to Jonathan. We haven't got through half of this yet. This is like an 11-minute clip.
Their worldview is completely coherent. It has a type of coherence that is, they organize their world in a certain way that yields certain fruits. But I really believe that there is an objective hierarchy of worlds, and there are some worlds and some purposes that yield more reality. And so in terms of Christ, let's say, the penal substitution vision of Christ yields a very, very narrow vision of Christ. And what I've seen in people that embrace that understanding of penal substitution is that they have no cosmology, they have no true ontology, they certainly do not have a metaphysics, and so because of that, they are subject to other patterns without even knowing it, the blinders that we're talking about, and they're in some way subject to other ontologies and other metaphysics that they don't even know, that are just acting on them without them knowing.
They are beholden to principalities unconsciously. I think that's I mean, in my experience, that is largely true. I'm not gonna. There are exceptions to that, really, but that is largely true. And I don't know if that's like a level of, and that's okay too. I would say that's okay. And this gets into much bigger issues that I would table for right now about how I think the vanguard of consciousness is in the West, because there's something about, I was saying this to Risto last night too. There's something about the I. There's something about the, what's so great about this is this helped my self-awareness, Grizz, because, and Matt C, very charitably, what a beautiful, sweet man, glazed me up, because we were talking about that after the whole Grizz comments, which will be my branding eventually about how I say I all the time. And I mean, I kind of know that about myself, but I can't, I was talking to my wife about this, and I can't even help it, really. Because I was explaining all this to her, and I played the videos for my kids, which they're defensive of me because my children love me, thank God. But I can't even help it, and I kind of don't even want to help it. I don't care. There was a little bit of a Risto report. We are coming back and forth with it because I don't. What was I just saying about Risto? Damn it. Oh, the evolution of consciousness in the West. Because it's a very Charles Williams point. Descent of the Dove. The point of the church is reconciliation. You don't get reconciliation without falls, without schisms, without division. And there was, I feel like what did I do? Did I expose this recently or something? It was some quote that somebody shared with me. Dang it. Now I feel like I need to look it up. We will get back to Peugeot. We're going to get back. We're taking a little aside. It's something about the idea is it better? Maybe I didn't post it. Where was it that? But it's basically like the idea is it sweeter to have something that you never lost, or to have lost something and then to have it found? Which is the whole idea of Tolkien's eucatastrophe. I think the schisming that's happened all throughout the church history, but then obviously happened most radically in the Protestant Reformation and then all the branches of Protestantism. There's something about that is part of the evolution of human consciousness, which I think will be used by God for the ultimate good. And so, and I'm not an Orthodox restorationist. I don't necessarily believe that the way further up and further in is for everyone to just go back to the pure restorationist Orthodox Church. I don't, a lot of people won't like that, but anyhow, is that a McCarthy quote? War is true divination. Dang. One of the ones that I like is war is the inability to have conflict. Okay, let's go back to the video.
Whereas without even knowing it, the blinders that we're talking about, and they're in some way subject to other ontologies and other metaphysics that they don't even know, that are just acting on them without them knowing. Whereas the fullness of Christ, let's say if you have a vision of Christ, I believe that is there in the Orthodox tradition, that's there in the mystical tradition, then that yields an ontology that is Christ-like. It yields everything. Like it yields a metaphysics, it yields an ontology, it yields a morality, it yields a practice, it yields all these things. And therefore it is objectively truer. And so that's the way I think to understand symbolism. And it's not, so it's not that it in some ways.
The way I like to say it, and Jed's in here, is everything is relative. This is the truth of the honest postmodernists and of just I mean, it just is true because that's the proper ontology, I think. Relational ontology. Everything is contextual. There is no view from nowhere. All that stuff. Which I think ties very much into like the fundamental nature of reality being person, not substance, person, which is what does Nate say? Thomistically, I think he calls it like a relational substance or something like that. There's like an antinomy there with that, but there are no discrete, unconscious, impersonal objects in the universe. That's why I'm not an objectivist. I think it's a stupid ontology. But everything is relative, but not arbitrary. I can understand why people think that because of where they're standing. I have the imagination to see it. So Jed says things are relative, but not arbitrary. So it doesn't mean things can just mean anything. This is how you can compare things. This is how there's you can measure even a better or worse, but even that is relative, you know? So, things are relative, but not arbitrary. Okay.
It has to do with purpose, right? It has to do with how embedded is your interpretation scheme? How much does it yield? So it's weird because it's kind of like, it's almost, people say like, you're Jonathan, you're postmodern, but it's like, you can't actually avoid this. Like I said, because it is true that the thief will live in a different world than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so here,
this is the thing. Like, I think if you are thinking about things accurately, people are going to think you're postmodern at some, but like, again, are those robots? Are those people that are just regurgitating things? Do you even know what postmodernism is? Do you even know what postmodernists say? Are you just taking the very simplistic identitarian label of like postmodernism is bad and means arbitrary nihilistic relativism, and that there is no like personal or substantive or like orienting reality? You think really everything is relative, because relative and arbitrary are not the same thing. That's why I like the Jedediah quote. So like acknowledging that, like what Peugeot is saying is like that you have to, or else you're going to fall, or else you're going to be collapsed into an Ouroboros Gödel point that can never see the way out of it. You will not be able to do further up and further in if you don't understand that truth of postmodernism, or whatever you want to call it, that everything is contextual and relative and relational.
Here's the thing. There are two things about what you said that I deeply resonate with, that I'd springboard off of, right? One of those is that I just admittedly, as you know, in my approach to philosophy, whenever I would advocate somebody explore a worldview, you have to look at how coherent it is across the scope of reality, right? If it only works within the classroom and then you leave the classroom and you can't live it, it's not a legitimate philosophy, right? Like that is itself an indictment of the philosophy. And so this sort of coherentist structure that says like, how coherent is it in terms of the totality of the cosmos, I think is supremely relevant in terms of discerning truth. And I think that's the sort of thing you're identifying when you're talking about this very sort of narrow sliver that makes you susceptible to a host of other things you know, would be problematic. The other thing though, and I think this is really an interesting element, and I didn't anticipate us going here, but I think it's really important, is that there is, I am definitely convinced, and so were the Eastern Church Fathers, that epistemology and ontology are, they are in some ways reciprocal.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And so like one of the things where people, for folks who obviously virtue epistemology is sort of like a contemporary version of this, but I think people can see it in just ordinary ways, right? Like, I don't know, obviously you're an artist, so you know the experience of going from like, I'm a novice, I don't know anything about art, and then I get better at whatever it is, painting, carving, drawing, whatever. And all of a sudden you start to look at other artists and you look at them differently because you're different. And it's like all of a sudden, oh, I didn't realize there were flaws in this guy's work, but now I see like the flaws really clearly. Anybody who's learned an instrument has the same sort of reciprocal experience where it's like, I wanted to learn guitar because I love this riff. And then I learned the riff and I realized it's incredibly simple and maybe it's cool and all, but now I start to appreciate other musicians more because I know something about guitar. Well, according to the church father, and virtue epistemology is basically saying the same thing. Like the more virtuous you become, the clearer you see morality, virtue, and vice. But the Eastern church fathers said the same thing, right? This was one of their critiques of the heretics. You are not in a proper epistemic position to actually make judgments about theology, right? Like that was that was one of their indictments.
Sorry, muted. Concabs.
Things like that though make me uncomfortable because like that's where you can that's where one can look at me speaking in the third person. I think it's really hard to know in a prescriptive way when one should act, when one should judge a situation. It's a difficult thing to know how to discern. And I think, again, that even that requires holiness. I think holy people can exercise judgment because it's judgment grounded in love. It's not just judgment. That's the whole be angry and do not sin. Or St. Paul saying, like, I judge no one. I judge not even myself. So, like, even that's saying to someone else that, like, you're actually a heretic because you're not in a position, you're not holy enough to be in an epistemic position to judge what is true. There's probably a time to say that. I don't know when it would be, and this is where I'm very hesitant to do that because I don't want to be proud. There can be a false humility rooted in that too, because I think there is a time to speak. When God tells you to say something, you should say something. It's just whether or not, again, whether is it the true self or the false self that's telling you to say something.
Of the heretics. And I am inclined to think that in terms of the remedy, right? I was sort of hinting at this is a problem, so how do you remedy it? And on the one hand, we've talked methodology, you stay close to the story and things like that. But it does seem that there's also an aspect of life, right? Like that if, let's just say, for example, the Orthodox Church is, the church, actually entering into the life of the church and the liturgical calendar and, the prayer, a prayer cycle and all these sorts of things and growing in the faith is part of how you begin to cultivate lenses that see the proper patterns as opposed to weird, bizarro, idiosyncratic, self-imposed sort of like eisegesis.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think that, I haven't had the courage to do this, but my brother, for example, he identified in the Bible like some of the very primal symbols that are there very early. And then he like taught himself to like bake sourdough bread, and then he learned to weave. Like he did all of these things that are kind of very basic, because he realized that the insight about the meaning of these primal, like learn to make fire, like these very primal things can yield more insight by actually practicing them than just thinking about them. Because when you think about them, then you want to jump all these different analogies. But if you actually have a fire in front of you and experience it, the insight you'll get is far more real than thinking about fire, you can say.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
No, that's actually brilliant. I mean, certainly I think, anybody who's done the sort of thing where they've studied something and then they went to the place knows what that's like, right there.
For sure.
We did it! We made it all the way through! Yay!
Okay, so I think it's probably all the commentary talking about this that I need to do. Now we can just come in and play. Now here we go. Here we go, guys. Let's take some time. Let's take a quiet moment. Okay, we're gonna open this up. Not necessarily nice. We can do rough and tumble play, but again, it's like we're gonna play the rules. We're gonna play the rules. We're gonna lay out the rules. And the rules are, there's always exceptions to rules. And I, as the captain of this flotilla channel who's doing this live streaming stuff, ultimately I get to decide who's doing proper play. And I would say, I don't know, be in touch with your body on like what's really right. Are you being driven by your animalistic instincts and passions and fears and insecurities? And this is the thing about righteous anger. It's such a, I really don't think I understood that Bible verse until the last couple years. And actually I've talked about this a lot, and I'm a big advocate of this. DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. It's antinomy-based therapy. Two opposing opposite things can be true at the same time, which has a kind of, this is very OG Rose and Nate Heil's conversation, which I've been plugging infinitely. It's just like, shut up, Luke, we get it. Go watch it then. Because PVK isn't promoting it. Selfish. But whatever, I will promote it, you know? The student has exceeded the master. I promote things more than PVK, because PVK is just like thinking about myself and Synod. What? Okay, DMT over DBT? I have the receipts. Your mileage may vary, but I get it. So two opposing opposite things can be true at the same time: radical acceptance and change. Because you can't change what you don't accept, right? You can't heal what you don't feel. All these things. Yeah, Martin Shaw gets it. See, it's really like a 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but with PVK. So like this conversation is really good. PVK doesn't realize it, but PVK really likes Martin Shaw and was pushing his book. Martin Shaw likes your conversation. Therefore, PVK likes your conversation. That's how it works. But in that conversation, am I going to lose my own thread? Darn it. DBT, radical acceptance, be angry and do not sin. Oh, this was the connection. So rationality is undergirded by non-rationality. And I think Nate and OG Rose talk about in there, like Vervaeke will use the term, I think, supra-rationality, or maybe it's trans-rationality or whatever. They're all fine words, but then Daniel says why he chooses non-rationality, and because it feels uncomfortable. Because there is going to be something when you move, because when you move from the Ouroboros to the spiral in repentance, either intellectual or behavioral or whatever, the myriad ways that you can repent, you will move from your internally coherent system, what makes sense to you, and you will repent of that, and error, revelation will manifest in error, like this isn't working. Like you'll get to some point, rock bottom, whatever the rock bottom is of your sin, of your missing the mark that you need to repent of, and whatever looked true and seemed right, your Christ will appear as non-rationality, antichrist, this thing that you didn't want to accept, the thing that was outside the gate, that wasn't part of your coherent system. And that revelation, that salvation will come from outside of the camp. And then if you accept that seed in humility and receive with meekness the implanted word, the Ouroboros changes to the spiral, and you become a living sacrifice. You die to yourself, that internally coherent Gödel system of facts and logic that you previously held to, and the reason Daniel said that he likes that, because the non-rationality, it's not irrationality, it's non-rationality, is because it feels uncomfortable. When you do that, it won't feel good. Because repentance doesn't really feel good in the moment, because it's a dying. And we like repentance around here, don't we, MJ? Okay, so we're going to go back to the rules. I will decide when the rules are being followed and when they aren't. And here's the thing. Don't try to colonize me. Here's the thing. I don't want to colonize you. I really don't. I'm just speaking the truth as I see it. it either resonates with you or it doesn't. You either have something in you. George MacDonald Lilith, I'm sorry I can't explain the thing to you. I but barely apprehend it myself. And the fact is, there's nothing in you for understanding it. You only think you understand things because you have unavoidable relations with them, and you conflate that with understanding. The fact is, no man understands anything. When he understands that, that is his first tottering step, not towards understanding, but towards the capacity of one day understanding. Read the book. It's so good. Because it's a Heideggerian consciousness changing book. And in the reading of the book, like Terrence Malick films or like perhaps Kurosawa, good art changes the way you see the world. And that's great because it's an evolution of consciousness. So here are the rules. Let's go over the rules and then I'll open this up and people come in and we can play. It's not necessarily nice. Again, it's not necessarily nice. It is loving. And sometimes loving is rough, but it is loving. I was going to finish this. So that's the whole be angry and do not sin. This is what I learned from dialectical behavioral therapy is you can be angry. That's an emotion. Be angry. Don't repress and suppress the reality that you're feeling emotions. I am currently feeling anger. If you lie to yourself and you say, right now, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. You're making me angry. Why are you, that kind of thing is not integrated. It's not well. It's projection and deflection, and there's a lot of weird things going on with that. Acknowledge your anger. Acknowledge all your emotions. Acknowledge your sadness. Acknowledge all of it, but do not be ruled by it. That is what be angry and do not sin means. This is like Jesus has the most condensed truth in the world. Like it's just like to me, it doesn't get any more dense and simple at the same time. Like Jesus's teaching is like divine simplicity in that it's like the most simple and yet profoundly dense, infinite teaching you could possibly have. So be angry, but then do not sin with that. Do not act. So then then the question is like, what is righteous anger? I don't know. It's being angry when God, it's acting in a kind of anger that is a kind of holy love that is an obedience to God's will that I don't know how to discern or prescribe, but if God ever calls me to it, I hope I can do it. Because it's not always right to be nice. Sometimes being nice can be the Ouroboros, but it's also not right to just be constantly pissed off. That's not good either. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Like yesterday, don't try to colonize me. I don't want to colonize you. Don't try to colonize me. I'm just scattering seeds. Okay, here are the rules. Okay, here we go. Channel dashboard. I feel like if somebody wants to make branding, because I don't know how to do any of that stuff, of my rules so that I can just play that right now, that would be good. You know how Chad, when he does his not estuaries, or when he used to, and now Neil does it maybe sometimes, maybe Chad will continue to do it, but he just plays the branding of like round 1, do this, round 2. That's great. That's fun. Welcome to a space to scatter seeds and conserve hospitality. Take some. This is online hospitality. I'm trying to model and participate in good conversations in the virtual place and bring the social back to social media. Ooh, look at people are texting me. Gabriel's texting me. Oh, I gotta reply to some other text. Okay, no name calling. Like, yeah, there's no point in calling someone a name, right? It's that Tim Keller thing, like how to disagree well. Steel man ideas. Represent ideas in a way that not only would your interlocutor or your opponent or the person you're talking to, because this is the nature of good faith, I think, not only would they accept your portrayal and your articulation of their viewpoint, they would say, that's better than I can say it. Because until then, you're just boxing ghosts. And then starman persons, which is and Jacob would disagree with this last time, but I disagree with him. Starman persons, assume the best in the person. Don't automatically assume evil. Don't assume malice. That doesn't mean that you have to be blind to the way that people continually show up. That's That's probably being naive. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Charity. Try to listen and ask genuine questions, at least equal to, but maybe more so than you talk. Try to not interrupt. If you continually interrupt, I will mute you or take you off stage. If you continually show up that way, I might not even add you to, I mean, how many chances does a person get? There's only so many chances that you can get. Like at some point, if you ask someone to not do something, like hospitality, if somebody comes into your house repeatedly, right? And you say, take your shoes off. Please take your shoes off. We're a shoes-free house. And then they are just like, and they maybe come in and they forget, but then they do that every time. And every time you say, please take your shoes off, and they just keep walking, then like at some point you might say like, you're not welcome in my house anymore, because it seems like you are not taking my preferences for my own house into, like, you are colonizing. You're saying, I don't want to take my shoes off, so I'm not going to. And that's just not how to act in someone else's house. That's not proper decorum. Starman I forget the guy's name. Starman is JD. If you want to put that in the comments, my boy Pick and Choose, he's the one who showed it to me. So I forget the guy's name. Ezekiel something, I believe. Yeah. All right. I am going to drop the link, and then I'm going to play some branding. I'm going to pin it. And then I'll look at comments until people show up and want to rock and roll. Rock and rollin'. All right. What branding do we want? Let's see. Not banners, comments. What is it? Media? Yeah, branding. Let's go with which one? Should we do one of Chad's? Let's do one of Chad's. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. I left 9 comments on the Glenn Sunshine conversation. And he did his whole randos in the end. He's nice. Sure. Good work. Let's see. I timed it. I left. Let's count them. Hello. Hello, dearie. Hello. That's my Mrs. Doubtfire.
How you doing, my friend?
Not too bad, man. Look at you. You got the stash rocking. You got the Fu Manchu. Maybe you and Daniel and I, we should get together and we should talk about wrestling. We're all wrestlers. I realized that the other day.
Oh, were we? All of us were?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I only really
the
did it.
And cauliflower to prove it.
Yeah, I didn't get that hardcore. My ears are still pretty okay, but and I always wore headgear for the most part, I think. But I only wrestled till 8th grade, middle school. I didn't wrestle in high school.
Okay. Yeah, I went through college, so.
Ooh.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Luke. And
yeah,
maybe this can help kick this off. Right here.
Yeah.
Are we looking at an object?
We're again, this is like the equivocation or like the subtlety of language, but I would say we are looking at something real. Okay. Sorry, I'm dealing with somebody off stream. Let me sorry. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
You greatly overestimate my strength there, buddy.
Who said that? What? Are you gonna break the apple?
He wants me to crush it with my hand.
Yeah. I mean, I understand what someone means when they say an object. I'm just saying there can be a what are the limits and the bounds of an object, and how do things exist are assumptions behind the idea of what an object is.
Right. Well, I mean, in some sense, if I'm looking at this, that's why I kind of dropped that comment, is like you're kind of the first appearance is this is an object,
Yeah.
right? That first appearance is that's an apple, right? But then like what you're seeing is your mind's projection of this image, right? So it's like you're seeing something that's actually happening inside of your own mind, right?
Yeah.
So
The
like
mind's eye. Yeah.
I think that when we're talking about claims for objectivity, what you're talking about is a claim for like an objective appearance. This appears objective to me,
Yeah.
but it's actually happening within my own subjectivity, and
Yes.
as far as I can know, only within my object or subjectivity. And then I'm taking your word for it that you're seeing the same apple that I'm seeing, right?
Yes, that's what I call the hard problem of all perception. Yeah.
But we all agree what's interesting and curious about this is that your image of the apple in your mind is probably not vitally different than my image of the apple, right? So
Well, we assume not, otherwise it would be hard to relate and operate in life. Yeah. This is
Right.
both our fields, like collective unconscious, collective
So I think-
representations.
I think what happens is sometimes like when we think that like this claim towards objective truth is like it's the first and most easiest impulse of saying this is the way things seem to me, right? That's
Yeah.
usually when somebody says objectively this is what's happening.
Yes.
It's like, well, what you're telling me is that this is how it appears to you.
Mhm.
But in this is a whole set of dialectical relations between the object and myself as the thinking subject, right? And
Right.
so it's not to say I wouldn't go so far to say it's not an object, but it's really what objects are kind of unfolded subjectivity.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to get into this because I have more thoughts about this, but we have I don't know how to say your name, and you don't have to have. He showed me camera off stream because sometimes there have been guests that have popped on, trolls perhaps, who sometimes don't have cameras and then they show lewd things on stream, which is something we don't want. So that's kind of the protocol of why we do that. But you asked in the private chat, is this debate? And it's not a debate. So this is the short version of what I'm doing. And I don't know when you tuned into the stream. I feel like I talked about this at some point, but I often do live streams. Someone asked me last night about what my channel's about. I said, it's probably a third of it is conversations with what we call randos, which are peoples of no natural expert class or certified importance, just random people getting their stories and them telling their stories, their life stories, usually with some sort of spiritual or religious valence. And then probably another third of it is me. It's just like a video diary, which is kind of like what my monologues are before I open up the live stream for other people to join. It's just me talking about whatever I'm thinking about in all the weird ways that I do it. And then the other third of it is this part where I will open up a live stream either to selective persons or just to the wide internet, like I'm doing right now, for me to have what I call conversational hospitality, or like my last live stream, bring the social back to social media. So to answer your question, this is not a debate at all. I don't particularly like debates, although sometimes people will debate here. It's more a space to know and be known and talk to people that usually has some sort of religious or spiritual flavor to it. That's what it is.
Yeah, I have a religious experience. I mean,
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are here, how you got here.
I'm an Orthodox Christian.
Okay.
I'm from Jordan,
From where?
and from Jordan,
Gordon.
Okay, Jordan. Got it.
and I've been searching for objective truth lately a lot these days.
Okay.
Yeah, in general, I'm a seeker of truth.
That's great. Well, you know, I noticed this in the Orthodox liturgy last week, because I'm Orthodox as well. During one of the litanies, we prayed for seekers of truth. That's something like the Orthodox Church will do that sometimes, where like I take that to just be like, anyone who is seeking the truth, you know, we said a prayer for them. And that's something I like about the Orthodox Church, is we pray for all Orthodox Christians and the whole world. We pray for everybody, which is a good thing. So I don't know. Like I said in the stream, I'm not a big fan, and because of what Jed just said, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more, I'm not a big fan of the word objective. I think I know what people mean by that. But in the same way that I played that Nathan Jacobs, Jonathan Peugeot clip about penal substitutionary atonement and what's really going on biblically, I think that most people who use the term objective they're not so much using words as being used by words. I think they are.
I think if you, but the thing is like when an Orthodox Christian says objective, they don't mean it in the same sense as when a modernist says objective. They're using the word in a different way. And I think what you said in your stream earlier was that you prefer the real. Well, that's what the real is. When an Orthodox person says objective, that's what they mean.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't, you know, I think what's more important is the thing underneath the term of reference being used, that's being pointed at. Like if that's the same thing, then we're on the same page, and that's what but I understand, like, objective in the mouth of a positivist or a modernist.
Yeah,
I can see why you would object, but I think it's a little different. It has a different resonance when it comes from an Orthodox person.
I agree. But that I try to say real just for the clarity's sake, because I want to distinguish from being a modernist.
Right.
Okay. So by objective truth, I mean something which is true, regardless of whether we believe it or not. This is how I define objective truth.
Yeah. Well, so part of what this community is, though, too, is like, do you know who Jordan Peterson is?
Yeah.
So one of the big things with Jordan, a lot of us have a history with Jordan Peterson, probably less so Jed. I have a history with Jordan Peterson, but Jed's familiar. Jordan Peterson, one of his big things that he talks about all the time is like, what do you mean by believe? And I like to make that distinction too, because if belief means just self-identify with thoughts in your head, I don't think that that's necessarily what believing means. I think believing is acting according to how you embody, which I think is the deeper Christian understanding of what belief is to act in a way such as you're embodying that in your body. So like when someone says, how did you define it? You're like, you believe that it is true, regardless of what you believe. So if you think something is true, disconnected from how you act in the world, I don't know. That starts to fall apart. Doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
I think I don't know. I would think of it more along the lines of, like, let's say, a truth that is a truth in the proper sense of truth with a capital T, whether we call it whether we use the word objective or the real or whatever. It's a truth that cannot be possessed or wielded by you, and but rather acts upon you instead, and irresistibly acts upon you, in fact.
So I don't know how to pronounce your name. Fares. Sorry, I'm a simple American.
Yeah, we're
Fares.
like dumbasses.
What is it?
Fares.
Paris. Wow. Oh, I'll try. I will try. My stupid tongue does not like it. But so I'm totally game for talking about ideas. But one of the things that I'll often do, I'm a big I'm a big fan of what I call, it's even the stream, Personalist Truth. That's I like to talk about the idea of a person a lot because I think truth is nested in a person. I don't think truth can be divorced from personhood. That's why Jesus said, "I am the truth." You search the scriptures because in them you think you have life, but it's they that testify about me. I'm the truth. Truth is rested in not in abstract ideas and concepts, which can be a form of Gnosticism. It's rooted in incarnation. It's rooted in a person. So that's fundamentally my personalist truth. But then rather than just talking about that, I like to then learn about people and talk about people. So can you tell us how did you even find this stream? Why did you click on it? And tell us a little bit more about yourself besides that you're an Orthodox Christian from Jordan.
I found the stream on YouTube, and I entered it. I found the link, and I thought it was interesting, so I entered the stream.
Well, welcome.
Nice.
I thought it
Welcome.
was a debate at first.
Do you go on other live streams?
Yeah,
Okay, nice. How so like what's your story? Have you always been Orthodox? Were you raised Orthodox? How old are you?
I was born Orthodox.
Okay.
How old am I?
Yeah.
I'd rather not share my age.
Okay. No, that's totally fine. I understand that. Yeah. Yeah, that's so so I suppose so like in America we have all these different Orthodox branches and things. So like are you part of the Antiochian church?
I'm part of the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Okay. All right. Nice. And
Okay.
you live in Jordan, you said.
Yes, I do.
What are some of your favorite what do you watch on YouTube? How do you where do you usually go on YouTube? How do you spend your time?
On YouTube, I watch physics, science, and Christianity.
Okay. Like what kind of channels? Any that I would know of?
Many channels, not just one channel.
Okay. Yeah.
Should I go?
Huh?
Should I go?
No, you're fine. You can just hang out. You don't have to talk all the time. I mean, this is like we're just rolling with sometimes with new people who come into we call this space is called this little corner of the internet. So it's like an online community really of a lot of people who know each other. So like Nate, for example, and Jed, I know pretty well. I mean, we've known each other for years. We talk pretty regularly, both online and offline. And so then when someone such as yourself comes onto the stream, we're just trying to get to know you a little bit, probably before we dive back into whatever we were talking about, like the subjective experience of the real apple,
Yeah. So it's also philosophy here.
Yeah. So in different areas. So like some of my friends will have different channels and some of them can be really philosophical. Nate over here runs a channel called Grail Country. So it's at Grail Country. And yeah, Nate, describe your channel? What kind of stuff do you do on your channel?
Gosh. What is it? I think I'm there's a fairly heavy emphasis on mysticism and a kind of wrestling with some of the stranger texts and operating out on the theological fringes oftentimes, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, Nate they do, I mean, different areas of the corner sometimes will go through books. Sometimes they'll do that where they will just like go through a book. So what are some of the books you guys have gone through? You've gone through have you done Goethe, Bulgakov, Meditations on the Tarot?
Yeah, I've done quite a lot on Bulgakov. I actually have a current series on his philosophy of economy. We did a series on Meditations on the Tarot, covering all 22 letters. And Jed was part of that for some of the times. And we did Emil Book's book, The Apocalypse of John. I talk about Barfield a lot. I've done a lot of Barfield stuff, mostly with Michael, who was one of the early founders of the channel. And then kind of just like whatever. And then I have a lot of interviews. So I talk to theologians. So I'll talk to theologians about their books. Or I have theologians that I've talked to, like probably initially I talked to them about their book, but then I formed a relationship with them. So I'll just have them on to talk about interesting stuff. So like, for example, I had one of my favorite conversations was with Dr. Chris Green and Jordan Daniel Wood on death. That was a very good conversation. We kind of struggled with death and how Christians should think about death. And I was in a different position than the two of them.
Oh yeah, that was a great combo. Where is that?
But I think I held my own and kind of made the points that I wanted to make. But yeah. So
this I'm showing right now, Nate's channel. I mean, he's spoken with a lot of great people. A lot of interesting conversations. Yeah, here's a panel with Dr. Chris Green in there. Chris Green's an amazing dude. You guys have had a conversation with. You guys did a conversation with Paul Kingsnorth too, didn't you?
Yep, we did. The Cathedral and the Machine was our conversation with Paul Kingsnorth. Yeah,
here's some of the Bulgakov stuff. Here you go. No, no, that wasn't it. But anyhow, there's a wealth of stuff. Here's Dr. Chris Green and Jed.
Jed and Chris and I talking about Bulgakov's eschatology.
So there's lots of
there's some of the Barfield content popping up too. You can see with the series we did on Romanticism Comes of Age.
Yeah. There's lots of great stuff in here. Yeah. I mean, that's like and then we have another thing. Sorry, we've something that has emerged out of this online community. So the brief history of it, which apologies for everyone who's heard this 1,000 times, but Jordan Peterson came onto the scene. Pastor Paul Vanderklay, who's in the comments here trolling people, he did a video on a pastor's understanding of Jordan Peterson. And here's more of my friends coming. And so then a bunch of people saw that video. YouTube just really highlighted that video for whatever reason. Paul had, I don't know, fewer than 200 subs at the time or something like that. Not very many. And then all of a sudden his channel just blew up overnight because they saw this video of a pastor talking about Jordan Peterson. And then all these people reached out to Paul Vanderklay to talk to him because they were really resonating with Jordan Peterson. And then this community emerged. And then we got this ritual of Paul would then start having conversations with all the people that were reaching out to him. And those became coined as randos because they're just random people from the internet. And then that became kind of the ritual of your initiation into this community, which is now called This Little Corner of the Internet, by having a randos conversation with Paul Vanderklay. Now lots of people do them. I do them sometimes. I don't know who else really does randos. Cbax does them. Christian Baxter is his channel. So Christian Baxter _YT is his channel. So there's lots of us who've all become friends, but that's kind of so it's this community. But then even in Nate's videos here, we've started having real conferences. So a lot of us have met in real life. We've had, I don't know, a handful of conferences now. Nate actually really helps organize and help people with doing conferences if they want to do conferences. And so it's all of that to say is it's hard to describe what this is. It's definitely not online intellectual debate culture. It's a weird, eclectic community that is very confusing to most people like yourself who find it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a very good faith space, like versus debate where you sort of have to, you can have good faith debate, but it's more competitive, rivalrous. But in this space, it's more like accumulative or abundant, like the multiple perspectives. If we use the Buddhist monks and the elephant analogy, if they all just had good faith and shared their perspective, then they would understand that it was an elephant. I think that's sort of the model here.
All I know is that Jed's the only one with true knowledge of the apple right now.
100%.
Oh, deep cut, Eucharistic knowing. Eat the apple. I wish we still had.
Participation.
I think all knowledge is reduced to chewing.
Okay. I'll subscribe to your channel,
What was that?
but I have to leave now.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, thanks for
It's nice to
coming,
meet
buddy.
you.
I'll subscribe
Thanks
to
for
the
coming
channel.
by.
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
Like, subscribe.
Thank you.
Like
Share.
and subscribe. Tell your friends.
Support McMo's
Okay,
Ko-Fi.
goodbye.
See you, buddy.
I don't know what order it's supposed to be, but I wanted to get back to the apple. I'm just pitching that.
Do it, buddy. Get it.
Okay. Because I think what's most interesting about the apple to me is like that it is like an object is one, that's one phraseology for what it is. It is real, it's substantial, it's something. But then I was thinking of like have you seen the show Alone, where they're like in the wilderness and they have to survive, and whoever, it's last man standing. It's a great show. It's super fun because you get to see the way that these people go into the wilderness where there is nothing. They can bring like 10 things with them, but nothing else that is formed, and so they have to make their habitat, and they have to find their food sources. So they have to like basically create a livable situation for themselves out of things that aren't organized that way. So are there trees objectively? Yes and no. Like, I don't know how we want to pin that down, but then do they need shelter? Yes, that's even more material in some ways for their survival. And so the narrative of like, I'm out here, there's this tree, which is good for lots of things or useful for lots of things. The telos of it is multiple. But then when it enters my narrative, then all of a sudden it becomes what it is to me, either shade or, food through bearing fruit, protection from weather. It can then be converted into a shelter or firewood, energy, all these things. So it's like, I just really liked that. I had that image in my head from the Apple story about like, what is it is very linked to narrative. And this is obviously extremely Jordan Peterson stuff, but I just wanted to throw that out there because it's sort of like, well, we could say it is an apple, and then that means lots of different things to different people. Like we were saying, but it's sort of generalized. I don't know the Owen Barfield reference, but that sounds true. What the words sounded good. And then I guess when you get to tasting the apple, then that does get a little bit more intimate or something like that. Yeah. Ran out of steam there.
Well, like one of the interesting things too, when you think about the apple that's now actively being consumed here, is
I can't.
I want to
hear things now.
problematize, not to
I'll be
get
back.
totally debate bro with Luke, but I think that like when we try to evacuate all objectivity, like this is a real object that I'm really consuming, right?
I like that more than objective, though. It's
So
a real
it's not.
a real thing that
I don't think that claims towards objectivity are like completely and utterly devoid of meaning. I just think that they're more complicated than just a mere appeal to an.
Well,
objective
we can have real things without reducing them to objects. So
Right.
the reason that that Luke is objecting to objectivity is because of the sense of objectivity, that the sense that the word objectivity takes on in modernity, where things are reduced to the pure objective in such a way that they actually lose their status as real things. So I don't think that Luke is objecting to the existence of real things, but real things are not the same thing as the objective in the modern sense. Esther Meek is really good on this point.
So would you say that like maybe the modern problem of objectivity is the assumption of like the God's eye view, like that we are truly external to these objects, and that we can make what would you say, like thoroughgoing claims about the nature of their objectivity? Is that where you see the problem lying?
I think the problem with it, the real spiritual problem with it is that the whole purpose of it is to put all things under our dominion, and to cut us out of right relationship with it, because we want to subject it to our dominion. That's the problem.
Well, I think part of it. Sorry, Nate, keep going.
Yeah. So that's that's it.
So the thing I was going to say, it's related to because Daniel's here, and it's related to your guys' conversation. I think it's really the biggest hurdle to a real kind of pluralism with the other is this, because I would say that kind of objectivity is a kind of, it leads to a kind of Ouroboros closed loop rationalism, where you are incapable of seeing the world outside of the internally coherent system of facts and logic that you perceive, and you just think you're seeing objectively, rationally. You just think you're seeing the world in its essence as it is, and the problem is you are and you are not.
Right, and you're actually like imposing your idea of the thing onto the thing,
Yes.
which does not allow for it to disclose itself to you.
Yes, you're inhibiting in your pursuit of like truth first.
By the way, I totally abused my powers and highlighted Afriel's comment because he was.
Listen, that's all right, because I'm constantly feeling bad because you're not producing as much content all the time, and I just use your StreamYard free of charge. Donate.
Well, I'm back now. I'm back now, buddy. So
donate to Nate's Ko-Fi. If you like my streams, pay for Nate's StreamYard account. But yeah, it's because I think that's the thing. I feel, because that's what we mean by like silos, or even identitarianism, or like the culture war or anything. That's what's happening. Is it's two people who are just like, we see the world as it is, and you see it totally differently, and you're just wrong.
Yeah.
And they can't get out of it. And then we're stuck. And then it's just war is the inability to have conflict. That's why I like that phrase, because you're actually not even having conflict then. You're out of communion. You're in two different worlds.
There's a interesting, I don't actually know where it is from, because I got it from like a professor talking about T.S. Eliot, but Eliot was talking about objective truth, and he said that oblivion and confrontation, or something like what you just said about war, are the two outcomes of objective truth. It's either the silo where you ignore each other and you just enjoy your silo and your enclosure, as Daniel would say, or if you feel the need to tip someone else's silo over, then like objective truth is the grounds on which you're doing that. And I found that to be very compelling, because I think that's one of the things I don't like about the way people argue or debate, or even like apologetics usually goes in this territory of like, and so you could see I just checkmated you in all of your perspectives and personal understanding of things. You can't get out of this little trap that I built for you, and so you have to believe in Jesus or not in Jesus or whatever. On my channel, I did a conversation with Joel Carini about a video that was on the Diary of the CEO, and it was a debate where he had Healthy Gamer, Dr. Healthy Gamer, and Greg Kokel, who's like he's written books about apologetics. Yeah,
Don't trigger me with Greg Kokel.
And Alex O'Connor. And so two of those three panelists are people that I think are interesting. Kokol is pretty predictable in most of the things he presents, but the interesting thing that I found from that conversation is Bartlett's hosting, and he's sort of like not sure what to do with spirituality, very modern CEO type disposition towards it all. But they were talking about meaning and purpose and life, and that was really good. Dr. Healthy Gamer is like Hindu, I think, and so he had weird alternative spiritual views that brought meaning into the whole thing. And O'Connor and Kokol were sitting on the opposite side of the table from those two. Like those were
Devil.
Uh-oh.
The devil. The devil was having none of your truth. The devil said, "Not today, Jesus. Not today, angels."
Can we
This-
just talk about how
this is-
distinguished Jess's beard looks? I haven't seen you in so long, Jess. It's looking really nice, man.
It's
think-
getting shaggy.
It's good. It's good.
Okay, good.
I think you also got
Thank you.
new specs.
Thank you.
Sorry, you got cut off in the middle of.
I was inspired by Jed's specs, it looks like.
I know.
That's
We're
all.
looking samesies today.
Yeah. This feels like it's connecting to the Nate's OG Rose conversation
No
because
way.
he was like, okay, we have the silos. So if you take an objective view, you're like, my silo is the correct view and yours is wrong. But then even when you go to the postmodern thing, you're like, well, I have my silo, you have yours. So what? And
We're
then you
can't do
then
anything.
you can't have interaction. And so this, I'd be interested in what he has to say, but this is what he was saying, like we need ways to have the silos meet while recognizing that they're silos and how the viewpoints are. And so and then he didn't go into details on what things were, but he says practices and like ways of connecting. I think that's some of what I guess we're trying to do here, even though
Well, I think
yeah.
Oddly, here's where my brain goes of all the places it goes, because I was actually thinking this earlier when Luke shared that clip from Pajot's conversation with Nathan Jacobs, and he was talking about his brother's experiment. The one with building a fire resonated with me because I think in the physical act of building a fire, you learn a lesson about the foolhardiness of creating closed circles, because fire requires air in order to have life. You have if you build a fire in such a way that you choke out any spaces for air to get into your fire, and air here I just naturally associate with breath, spirit, and wind, right? Then you're not going to have a fire that is able to burn in a healthy way. And so there really are there are actual like lessons about reality to be learned from engaging in those kind of primal physical acts. That's probably the best thing that Pedro said in that entire conversation, actually.
All right, I want
Daniel, good to see you again.
I want to welcome our new guest of honor. Ready, Daniel? Here we go. Shine, Jesus.
Jesus, shine, shine.
Hey, there he
is. Jesus, shine,
Let the
Jesus.
Father's glory
Shine, Jesus.
To
blaze.
do
I don't have
choreography to
cauliflower.
that
This
when I was a
is-
kid.
Jedi,
This is
Nate,
getting
wonderful to
off
see.
the
Jedi,
rails.
I don't have cornflower ear, as one could call it. I salute you. So I did wrestle for like 6 or 7 years. So that's
I
amazing.
did. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
I did.
Let's
And Ian,
guess
good-
everyone's weights. What weights did you wrestle at in high
Daniel
school?
was 106 pounder for sure. At least his freshman year in high school, I can tell you that.
Who wasn't like 100-pounder their freshman year? Monsters.
Yeah, our wrestling
Yeah,
coach made us
Nate.
do cross country too. So, it was terrible. He's like, why are we doing this? Because you have to make weight. What? No, stop. And
think it's
Ian,
good
it is
for-
good to see you. We're still talking about your recent visit. That was so fun when y'all came by. So that was a,
Oh,
that
us
was
too.
a blast.
Yeah,
So
thanks for having us.
My son, who is a giant for those who haven't met him in real life,
Boy.
he went through. He tried out wrestling, and his uncle was actually a wrestling coach and was really excited to get him into wrestling. But he lost interest in wrestling, and the reason he lost interest in wrestling for 2 reasons. First of all, because of his size, they had him wrestling against high schoolers when he was like in 4th grade. So
Awesome.
and the skill gap was such that it was really practice was really frustrating for him, because he was wrestling with wrestlers that were much more experienced but older and
With
skilled than
men.
he was. So he didn't get much out of practice. He started getting his ass kicked constantly. And then he would go to tournaments, and he would get a medal, even though there was nobody to wrestle him, because there was nobody else in his weight class to wrestle against him.
Wow.
So he just would get first place, and he got tired of that rather quickly. So that was the end of his wrestling career.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually got in a fight with our heavyweight once. I was had to drop a bunch of weight, and we had a 2-day tournament, and I had some Ben and Jerry's ice cream. We were on a travel. I had some Ben and Jerry's ice cream in my refrigerator, and he got stoned in the bathroom and then ate all of my ice cream.
As
And so I
heavyweights will do.
I fought him until he went back to 7-Eleven and bought me a new pint. Like, I mean, it was fists and elbows and knees. It was definitely the highlight of my career.
That's like, I mean, someone who's been starving themselves for a long time, you don't eat their ice cream.
You don't mess with Chunky Monkey with the starving wrestler, that's for sure.
That's my wife's pet name for me.
Chunky monkey. Yeah. Yeah. I always liked how wrestling season was during Thanksgiving and Christmas, where grandma made her famous eclair and put it on the table. Oh, that's cool. I'm 3 pounds over and have 2 days to lose it. But that eclair looks great. Man, It looks nice.
Yeah. That's always the joke, is people are just like, this is just eating in front of you. This is so good.
Well, so Luke, I wanted to bring something up that I'm kind of working on as soon as I get off the computer here, because I'm working in category theory for some of the stuff I'm working on. And one of the interesting things in category theory, because I've been dealing a lot with curvature in a lot of the work that I'm doing, but we need to tighten up our definitions a little bit just to make them talk better. And so when in category theory, when you're taking two disparate categories, right? So let's say quantity and quality, which is what we're working with. The way that you put those together, like the standard language would call it curvature, in category theory, they're going to call that an adjunction, right? And what that ultimately does is it produces a monad immediately below it, right, in category theory, with three terms, which is an endofunctor, a unit, and a multiplier. Like, I'm just kind of explaining the broad basis here. But when we're thinking about where we make claims towards objectivity at the local level, let's say a Buddhist monk and a Christian priest having a discussion about what's ultimately real, right? What you're really looking for is not for these two ideas to totally agree 100%, because it's really fundamentally not feasible, right? But there's an adjunction where they can talk to each other, right? There's a shared space. And so, like, I think that when we're talking about like objective claims, like, Peugeot and what was the other guy's, Nathan Jacobs, right? That was the other guy. Right. I mean, it's pretty easy when you're slipping into like in community discussions to say this is objective, and you're not going to get real pushback. Right. It's kind of like we share the same assumptions. We share the same axiomatic baseline. But that's, you put those guys in conversation, put him in conversation with Alex O'Connor, and he's going to say, well, wait a minute. Is that actually the case? Right. And so, like, when we're talking about like where disagreements are truly fundamental, like where we have to go is not, you can't go at the horizontal level. You have to go vertical to an adjunct above that. What is it that allows these two disparate perspectives to actually be in meaningful conversation and productive conversation with each other?
Perhaps a mediator?
In some sense, yeah, Jess, I think that would be a good word for what an adjunct is.
I love it.
And you mean, so a person as a mediator, or are you saying like a mediating value?
Well, I mean, in our theory, it is value is the mediator, but
Maybe
But
an
you could
angel.
say that in the Christian milieu, that is a person, right?
A
But-
value, a person. I mean,
Right.
potato. Lucas, look at this guy.
Hey, Luke.
I'm
How you
being
doing, brother?
blessed. Being blessed by the Dutchman.
What is this? What is this stream about? I just got home.
It's
What are
about
you guys
Luke.
talking about?
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
Always.
Me,
It's Luke's
baby.
therapy session.
Me. This is a good time for branding. Let's do something fun about branding. Which narcissistic clip should we play? Let's go.
Over time, the more I interact with you, the more I realize you've been right this whole time. Not always, but sometimes.
Oh, Sam. I
I
love
also
you too.
know how to push your buttons, but
There we go. Just listen. If you get in early on Luke Coin, buy your stock now. It can't fail.
Jed, the thing that you were saying is that's how my too long story about the other podcast ends, is that O'Connor and Kokol are talking about the same thing, but they're talking about the non-overlapping aspects of their circles. And so this adjunct idea is precisely what I'm identifying Healthy Gamer and Bartlett are talking about, because they're talking about, well, really they're talking about personal phenomenology, like what it is that you're experiencing. And I think that that's why I tune into every Luke stream that I can, because that's something that he sees so clearly and makes us all talk about, because it's his channel and we have to exist by his rules.
He's such a dictator.
Yes. Colonizer.
Gentle dictator.
Wait, sorry. I apologize for breaking rule number 1. My bad.
That's my other pet name for my wife, Gentle Dictator, but she calls me Gentle Dick.
Nice. Is that a compliment in the Midwest?
Daniel, I'm curious from your conversation with Nate, like what do you say about what kind of practices, or what do you do to bridge these gaps between people who are stuck in opposing ideology or thought? Or
No, that's an excellent question, and Jess, it's good to see you, and Luke, good to see you as well. No, I really enjoyed speaking with you, Nate. Thank you for having me. That was wonderful, and today I enjoyed speaking. I really was, what you were saying right there was wonderful. Yeah, well, there's a few things. I know y'all were talking about objectivity as well. First off, the difference that you think is the key, like the key difference between you and the other, is something that you have pre-configured going into the discussion. So you have to let the person surprise you with the difference, because the difference that surprises you is the real difference versus the one that you've kind of thought about ahead of time, right? So you have to move. One of the problems is we go, and perhaps this ties to the objectivity point, you can't deal with others' indifference according to a plan, or say things. You have to come into a certain mode where you're prepared for the difference to appear, right? But then that's funny because that gets into anxiety. That's usually when you have nervous system regulation. The nervous system goes crazy. Like you can't really do it mentally. It has to be embodied. It has to be a kind of embodied experience, right? Also, too, it is really, really, really hard to listen. Actually, it's remarkably difficult to listen.
What?
Exactly. Guy, you're hearing, not listening, right? So Guy Sinstock would talk about like spending life going, oh, have we ever listened versus just heard information? And to me, with that distinction, I think often we hear, which is we take otherness and situate it within our framework, our internally consistent system, and map, and thus filter the difference through our understanding, versus listen to it where we understand the difference according to their understanding, right? Like, I know we have a paper in Third Thoughts called Assuming the Best. And I think you were mentioning that with Star Manning. So there's a form of assuming the best, which is simply the wanting to assume the best, like wanting to kind of believe that everyone's the same or different things. But then there's the assuming the best, which is kind of the mental act of going, okay, if this person thinks this way, they believe it is right to think that way. And in order to actually listen to them, I have to understand the way that they understand reality and is coming to that conclusion, right? Because no one intends to be wrong. If you think you're wrong about something, you think you're right to think you're wrong about that thing, right? If you think that you're doing this evil thing, like killing someone is something you ought to do, well, you think it's good to kill that person. Now, I'm not saying it is good. We're talking about the issue of intention and motivation, right? You kind of naturally have to stitch everything together. Okay, so I want to assume the best in the sense that I want to assume that you have what is to you a good intention for the way that you think yourself. And I'm trying to grasp that, because if I don't grasp that in the system in which you are operating into, then I'm probably going to hear, but I'm not going to listen, if you will, right? And doing that work can be very, very difficult, because when people are giving you their reasons, you can be like, that's stupid. That doesn't make sense. I don't get it, right? So you kind of have to go through that difficulty to really, really hear it. But then I think that's the only way to get to what, there's actually a lot to this, honestly. It's a wonderful question. Like, I think also, like Michelle and I were just having a talk on enclosures, which makes me think what Nate and I were talking about, the open and closed circle, which I'm in his debt for Tomberg, who I did not know about. So thank you very much, Nate. And on the idea of, like, also in conversation, the ability to engage, like, let me give one practical thing, the ability to engage in something we call meta talks. Like Michelle and I talk about how all the times, like, couples in relationships get in enclosures, right? Where the man does something for the woman, is trying to be nice, they don't understand it, then you feel hurt and you just go inward. You enclose into yourself, right? And the problem is you could stay like that forever, right? In that kind of enclosure, in that withdrawal. But a key move is the ability to do like a meta move, where you jump up and say, well, why did the person not interpret that as good? Why was the person hurt by that? So you move from the horizontal to the vertical, and that actually allows you to then move out of the enclosure and meet each other on a different level, right? And actually, this is where something like philosophy becomes really, really practical, because it allows you to escape, to move beyond that immediacy and actually kind of talk about the talking, ask questions about the questions, to think about the words that can free you from the enclosures you end up with. That becomes a really important skill as well, because we tend toward enclosures. I think the willingness to be, I'll pause, but I think the willingness to be surprised and prepared for surprise. And if you don't do that, I don't think you can find the curvature that Jediah is talking about. And also, I guess I'm also thinking with objectivity, I've been doing a lot recently, my eternal battle with Giles Deleuze, who I always find myself unable to escape, and I don't want anything to do with him. And I'm like, but there's something here. And then he punches you in the side. You're like, okay. Where I get this kind of idea in Giles Deleuze of overlap, where if you can't get certainty, or you can't get, the correspondence theory of truth, if you talk between difference and X appears in this map and this map and this map and this map and this map, there would be reason to think that X is part of a shared reality, right? But that comes from the experience of difference, so that you can see X continually appearing, right? And so I think part of the issue is the word objective gets co-opted into an individual disinterestedness versus a communal activity found via overlap that requires people to deal with the anxiety of the other person and to handle that surprise, to find the thing that's overlapping, and then have the commitment to follow that in its unfolding and its curvature. But those are some thoughts.
It's good. Is it just, like, I don't want to try to, is it just, you're talking about a certain kind of empathy. That's part of it, right? But it's also taking on perspective. And then what if what surprises you is actually worse than you thought it was?
That's a possibility. Yeah.
Not like I would be, I'm willing to, like,
dang it. You probably have to be open to that, because, like, the real kind of death thing that I think Christianity entails, kenosis by kenosis, one may say, and, like, even talking about, even making it very practical with, like, Jesus, like, I'll say radical things of, like, Jesus did not know in a transactional way what was on the other side of his death.
Somebody makes no sense if he did.
I don't think so, but I don't think most Christians think of it that way, which takes your faith in God and makes it into mammon.
Yeah,
and so I think
when transactional
Yeah, and when we
know,
experience that
agency,
kind of thing in the
causality.
other, it's got to feel that way. Like it's got to feel like it's going to feel. This is most of the meaningful transformation in your life is going to feel like you're dying.
Yeah, and everything's going wrong.
Yeah.
Well, Tomberg makes a really big deal out of Gethsemane. In fact, for Tomberg, I believe Meditations on the Tarot, letter 8, he essentially says that Christ experienced eternal hell in the agony of Gethsemane. So I would say I'm inclined to think that that it was very real. So,
well, I'd like to, first of all, Nate, thank you for introducing Daniel to Tomberg. So Meditations on the Tarot is not a book you read, it's a book you get stuck in. Yeah, I don't think I've put it down for like 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think Nate and I were discovering it pretty much close to the same time.
Yeah, which is why you were involved in our series. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the 9th letter for the last 6 months.
That's wow. Yeah, you can, that one in particular. Yeah, I wish Nathan Jacobs would read that letter.
Right. But I want to come back to this question of like certainty, right? Because I think and
yeah,
how
actually,
it relates
do you
to
mind, Jed? Because there was something. I'm glad you're bringing this up because there was something that, and I'm going to let you finish what you had to say.
No, go ahead.
But then I want you to finish. But I'm going to have a follow up because there was something I almost said about certainty after Daniel was finished that I wasn't sure the timing was right. So you go ahead and make your point, and then I may or may not say the thing I was going to say about certainty.
Right. So even if we look at the sciences that we speak in objective terms, right? I mean, there's holes in the standard model of the universe that you can drive the universe through. Like when it comes to dark matter and dark energy, the standard model breaks down, right? We have a few laws, first and second laws of thermodynamics that seem to be relatively certain. We have, some renderings of gravity that seem to be relatively certain. But even in the sciences, a lot of things that we think are certain in the sciences are still really truly up for grabs, right? So I think there's this really good book about philosophy of glimpses that the audience should check out, right? Because I really do think that when we're talking about objectivity, what we're talking about is the first moment of apprehension of something external to yourself, right, that appears as the other. But upon further investigation, what appears as the other is not other, right? And so I think that this is the difficulty of like when people try to ground their truth claims in objectivity, is that is kind of like layer one of like a near infinite regress of layers of, it's like kind of turtles all the way down kind of argument. Right. So certainty is like, I mean, even as a Christian, like I take certain things to be axiomatic, but can I be actually certain about those? The answer is actually no. Right. Not, at least at the level of rationality. That's not where certainty or certitude resides. Because there's just any truly rational and true, like in a sense that the rational perspective is a true perspective, is always going to be incomplete. And there will never be a complete rational perspective of, things pertaining to the infinite. Let's put it that way. So when we're talking about certainties, it's like, I think that there's been a kind of a breakdown. I would say there's been a definite breakdown in Christian communities about the nature of certitude. That's why we have deconstruction, is because many of the things that were passed off to us, in our early upbringing, especially, I mean, I think all of us here, Lucas, I don't know your background, but the rest of us, I know were raised in more or less evangelical traditions, is especially if you were exposed early on to apologetics, is these things were kind of positioned to us as like unassailable facts about the nature of reality itself. And the difficulty is if you're intellectually honest, you don't linger there, because you realize that those things that are being presented to you as objective fact are in some sense can only attain at the level of mere appearance at the first glance. You look deeper, and it's not that like basic Christian truths I think are false. I don't believe that. I think they're true, but I can't put an objective claim on that once you layer down and you begin to really investigate what's going on there. Like these claims that we have are genuinely and truly faith claims. And I think that so when I look at those questions of certainty and objectivity, it's like, okay, I can acknowledge that people are having those conversations, but what I don't grant is that they've really penetrated it into the depths of the matters that they're exploring.
So I'm going to say what I said, because I think what you just said about certainty ties well to the thought that I had that I was somewhat hesitant to introduce, probably because I'm stepping on my own toes, because I'm getting ready to do a live stream on Meditations on the Tarot Letter 4 on Saturday.
Okay, cool.
And so I'll be talking about some of this. But I think the certainty, and you can see this you can actually see this in our culture. But certainty is it's an evasion. It's an evasion of both of both authority and judgment. And we actually and it's an evasion of authority and judgment for the sake of power. Because certainty, a claim to certainty, a claim to certainty gives you a certain power over others and a certain power over your environment. I would argue that certainty is an inherently closed circle kind of idea. And that what Christian faith is pointing you toward instead is authority and proper judgment, which is exercised only underneath proper authority.
So I've been looking at some of William Blake's stuff, specifically around the book of Job. Surprise, surprise. But Blake has if I understand him right, he has the idea that reason is just in his artwork. Reason comes up as a cloud barrier, and then in his one character, I forget the name of the writing, but he calls it your reason, meaning your reason, but it's also a play on the word horizon, horizon. And so reason is always this horizon line that's this boundary marker that separates. And for Blake, the way you get past it is by the imagination. So he even says that Christ is the divine imagination, and this is more true than reason. So I bring that up because you can have a certainty in reason, which I think is just sort of like you can't have anymore. Like that's done. We're done with trying. We thought it could be possible. It's not possible. But there's like. Jed, you said certainties. Like, can you have a certainty in the imagination? Because for like the way I understand it, like the imagination is an exploration of the things past that which you can have reasonable certainty about, but are real things nonetheless. But you experience them differently. You maybe can apply logic or whatever to them, but ultimately they affect you in a way that would be more like awe, wonder, terror, these kind of things. Those are the experiences of the things past the imagination that could help you navigate and figure out what's real past the horizon, so to speak. And what ends up being revealed is that past the horizon is Christ, and that it's actually a good. There's not an evil malevolent God past at the far reaches of everything, but actually love that moves towards us. And so anyway, all that.
Can you restate? Can you just? That was really important, Jess. Can you go back and just because like I've got thoughts, but I want to form them more. Can you restate that question? about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
role of
So
imagination. It's very fascinating because
what kind of certainties are we talking about? Because I feel like I have a certainty that's beyond reason, and I have no certainty in anything reasonable.
right.
Peace
And
that
I think
passes
that's
understanding, maybe.
yes. So this
Yeah,
is
that's
where I
that's
think
that's
certitude
basically it.
actually is not a rational. I don't think that certainty is a rational property. I think the only rational property of like objectivity is uncertainty. Like there is a certain amount of uncertainty in any claims that we make at the rational level. When you're talking about imagination, contemplation, intuition, these are the things where we're probably closer to the certitude than we realize, right?
Mhm.
But you cannot, by the very nature of the absolute itself, make a certain claim at the rational level of something that you can know at a different level that I would call supra or meta rational, right? And so the properties of like the working of imagination is probably fundamentally more constitutive of material reality than we even acknowledge, right? So do you have the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris without the Christian story that preceded it, right? The idea and the imagination comes to bear and it shapes the material reality. So the super rational, sub rational, meta rational, however you want to put that below or above rationality, you can put it either direction, is where the deeper, like I would say, civilizational shaping forces actually lie, right? And I don't think that like there's any possible way, like we can present our positions as rational, as certain, but obviously like once you probe into those, there are all kinds of sub and super rational perspectives that are informing those positions.
Well, not to jump in, that's all excellent. That's a fantastic question from Elotion Helper. So a few things. First, yet on that question of what if you discover that the thing on the other side is worse, I think that gets into the question of asking yourself, what is your ministry? Because if you don't really, and prayerfully in asking that, because your ministry will determine the thing that's worse that you're supposed to dwell in, that becomes a way of life, not just a rational calculus or things like that. Who are you going to build your church around? Like, who is your mission going to be? Because I do think there's something about being Christian that takes on, that is actually the taking on of something you find is worse than you thought. But then there's also the problem of becoming the savior who can take on any possible worse than you thought, right? So there does become a question of your ministry there. And then, of course, is it a ministry of one person, the neighbor? Is it the ministry of the sexually broken, the intellect, et cetera, so forth? The question of ministry becomes big there. And then that gets into having a community by which you can ask the question of ministry and think through the ministry and so on and so forth. You must always be ready for encountering something that you thought was worse than you thought, because I think that gets into the Gethsemane, the going through hell that is necessary for a certain purification, of which never ends, because as soon as you think it's over, you're done. And I think that actually speaks to this question of certainty. So it's very interesting. There's certainty in the intellectual way, meaning I have a system and therefore I know where things are going to end up, versus a certain trust that there is something holding me, like there's a certain being supporting me, that even if I don't understand it, I trust it, right? I think the Christian is called to a certain trust in reality, in the world, right? Like I can't be certain about how it's going to unfold, but I can be certain that it will unfold, but only that. Like you can be certain about, in a sense, you can be certain about really, really X variable things, such as I experience, right? The problem is the moment I say the phrase I experience, it's in the rational register, so it's not that. It is the pure perception in that kind of Kyoto school of the imagination that you don't put into words but undergo, right? That comes upon you. And even talking about it is problematic, right? And yet not talking about it is also problematic, because then you can't enter into the social or the communal or on and on and on, right? Like there's something about Jockin and I will talk about the strike of beauty. as opposed to the correspondence of beauty, which is that mystical sort of moment, which that's realer than real, right? It would be sort of ridiculous to suggest that there's no something like certainty in that realist of real, but the certainty is inseparable from the entering into the space of it and witnessing of it and the worship of it. And the moment you move outside of it, the moment you talk about certainty in it, it's not that. In that sense, it's slipping away, right? So you have to, there's a certain certainty afforded by a dwelling. But then this certainty, I think, has a key characteristic. This form of certainty. So let me say one more thing. In epistemology, I would say confidence is possible, not certainty. You can have confidence that every time I drop the ball, that it will fall, but I can't have certainty that every time I drop the ball, it will fall. That's that kind of David Hume, right? But confidence is important. So we want to avoid a kind of barbaricism of refinement that leads us to a bad nihilism, which is no good. We don't want that, right? But we also want humility to be an open circle, as we were speaking with Nate, versus a closed circle, right? But the kind of certainty that seems to be valid is always on the other side of fear, I think. I think there's always a courage element, right? Because it has to be full-bodied. It has to be something that changes you into the entering of it, that requires a certain ability to trust that which you don't understand, so that then the fullness of God can unfold to you, right? But that's much more participatory, much more giving yourself over to something. There's more to say on that, but that excellent question. No, I'm in an internally consistent. That's the problem. I'm fallen. I'm a sinner. I'm prone to be in a closed circle. The best I can do, in the moment I think I'm not, I'm like Luke looking down at Peter looking down at the water and sinking, or looking over the shoulder and the wife turning to pillar. This is the issue. We never, ever, 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 ever overcome the problem of internally consistent systems. We're all situated in them. But what we can do is change our orientation to them. Like the Gödel point is an orientation to it, right? And also you have to be prepared. And so there's a bunch of things. I'm always, there's all these weird Hegelian moves that I would hesitate to get into. So there's a danger with an internally consistent system, but that doesn't mean you can't live something that's like an art form, like an art forming, where you are actively discerning, you're actively in the present. To me, the words that we have a water gun fight, it is warm in Virginia, living the dream. But a system, like to me with the term system, we talk about, and then I'll stop with belonging again to one, a system is something that removes the human element. Like you can code it in and you get the result. Like it kind of does it. And the problem is, I think a lot of thinking actually just ends up in service of a tracing out of a system. But thinking can be in service of actually more like I was mentioning with Nate, going out in the wild and discerning. And I think that's making life more like an art form. I think part of the issue is negating, sublating our systems in maps into art forms. And it's kind of funny because we actually use the map to explore the terrain. We actually did it as opposed to just replacing the work of the terrain. Then it actually would go a very long way to making us open as opposed to close. So there's something about moving the direction of the art forming with other people, I suppose, that requires a constant dwelling. But here's the issue. I guess, I'll stop. But there's a lot. Because I am always at any moment susceptible and likely to fall into self-effacement, internal consistency, then you have to make a point to perpetually or constantly, not that I do it perfectly, putting yourself in the place of encountering otherness and other people, or questioning your self-deception, or going into places. And this is where I think the social coordination mechanism is such a big deal, because you could argue in history the infrastructure was not there to do that well. It was really hard to encounter otherness, because if you live in Virginia, the people who are different are probably actually not that different, even if they seem different, because of the geographical similarities or locations or different things. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to keep you open. And the moment you think you are, you're moving into that rational register and closing down. So I think this becomes a very embodied, constant work. And then, of course, I think that's important, because it means you're never any better than anyone else, right? Now, that doesn't mean there isn't any truth or goodness, but, the thing that Jock will talk about a lot at the Net is how truth and goodness have to be sublated into the beautiful. It has to be experienced into the encounter of otherness or the open circle, right? Otherwise, your idea of the good just leads to violence, or your idea of the true just leads to violence, right? There has to be a means of bringing it in with other people. Now, all of that has to be explained, but I will pause there.
So this is, I want an admin thing. Rigel is going to be
muted,
doing
my brother.
his stream in 16 minutes.
No.
So I will hard cut us off come hell or high water. All right. Paul Renee Nichols showed up. He has things to say. The only thing I would say, and then I'll just shut up, is that basically, like that's what I try to do is I try to cultivate that space rather than merely articulating it, because I think the cultivation of the space is better about actually transforming the consciousness than telling propositionally the people how you get there. Because I've transcended that propositional tyranny stuff. Paul Renee, what up?
I heard the standard model mentioned, and the whole physics science enterprise is something I'm not a huge fan of. So I wanted to jump in on that uncertainty. I mean, I think stories are primary, and I'm inclined to for people to stop saying the meaning crisis and start saying the story crisis for all sorts of reasons, but I won't get into that. And when it comes to certainty and rationality, I think physics is a good example. I mean, I'm sure all sorts of people have heard Eric Weinstein bitch about string theory, but I think it's way worse than that. Like I don't know, for some reason I've gone down a rabbit hole about what is inside protons recently, and there was a time when I fantasized about winning the Nobel Prize in physics. And the thing is as someone who's trained in mathematics, among other things, there is a level of certainty that having mathematical formula gives you, which I think is false, because
False or incomplete, Paul?
False. I mean, sure, like to some extent the universe is intelligible to us and we can make observations and describe them, but the entire enterprise of physics is telling stories to justify getting paychecks. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. Maybe we need to have job programs to keep these people off the streets and from doing bad things. I'm sure a case could be made for that. But the wrapper is this story that we are going to discover everything about the universe and we're going to make it submit to us. And then within that, they're constantly telling new and newer stories to justify the money we're paying them. And the mathematical formula, like the electromagnetic equations were always a big thing to me. I forget what the guy who came up with them are. There's like 4 of them, and if you solve them, it's for light. Being someone with an electrical engineering degree and an interest in physics, that was always a thing for me. And you look at that, you think that describes reality, and then there's this whole enterprise of, oh, we're going to unify all the forces, and then we're going to discover everything. But there's the story outside of that, but we focus on the mathematical formulas and say we have certainty about this stuff. And I think the only objective thing is God, and I think you got to start with the Nicene Creed. And I'm gonna, Luke, I'm gonna push back on Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. Like there were heresies over trying to separate, not treat Jesus as both fully God and fully man. And if you participate in the nature of God And if he ascended into heaven and he lives outside of time, and it was the incarnate Jesus who spoke over creation and separated the waters, then obviously he knew what going down into death and harrowing hell was. But that's kind of a minor nitpicking. My broader point is we have to be cognizant of these stories and the axioms they're based on, and not get fooled into certainty by formalism, which is really just a way of encoding a series of observations. And I think in modernity, we've lost a lot of, we've lost the ability to separate these things and understand exactly what we're doing. And we've gotten lost in all of that.
I think it's a bit of a category error to suggest that everything that Christ knows as the second person of the Holy Trinity, Christ knows within his human psychological subjectivity. I don't think that necessarily follows. So you and Luke could both be right on that minor point.
I mean, the wedding of Cana, which has all sorts of importance. The Theotokos goes to Jesus and tells him to do stuff, and he goes, "O woman, what have you to do with me? My hour has not yet come." Like, I don't, I think it's super hard to dodge that Christ knew exactly what he was doing.
He's had some intimation of it, but whether he understood the full implications of it within his human psychological subjectivity, I don't think that necessarily follows.
Well, and I think there's some degree too of like where you're thinking what he knew. Do you think he knew a bunch of information about the future, or did he have an orientation of trust and an intuition that like this isn't ready?
Could I also, I mean, I don't want to cut off like the questions about, Chalcedonian Orthodoxy here, because I think we all at some level hold to that. How we would describe it is a little bit different, but I'm curious, Paul, like, would you describe mathematics as narrative by other means?
Mathematics can be employed in narrative, and I think that's what physics equations are.
Okay.
But I don't think mathematics is itself narrative. I think mathematics is way. I mean, I'm going to use the word describe, but I don't want this to be confused with narrative. Mathematics is a way of describing patterns.
Okay, so how would you distinguish between when it's just simply descriptive of patterns versus its narrative? Like, so would you say that like cosmology fits in that narrative category, but something else may fit more in just descriptive categories?
I mean, if we're talking about like, physics cosmology, like the Big Bang nonsense. Another rabbit hole I've gone down is Big Bang trutherism, and the fact that like the cosmic microwave background radiation is kind of a scam story, that they've had to severely cook the data to come up with that. And so there's layers and layers of lies: dark matter, dark energy, the Big Bang, cosmic background radiation. All of that stuff is we want a certain story about how everything is happening physically in the universe, and we're trying to fit observations into that, and that's creating all these sub stories. And that's different from like I mean I tried getting a BA in pure mathematics on top of my electrical engineering degree, and I ended up taking both semesters of senior abstract algebra, which I really liked. And we've got stuff called field theory, and for the math nerds out there, there's something called the real numbers or the complex numbers. And you can talk about what those mean, what you know about that. And if you've ever been stuck in algebra class and had to graph y equals x squared, you've encountered the real plane, at least on the surface of it. But in field theory, what we do is we take another level of abstraction to where we can talk about whole classes of things like the real numbers and the complex numbers. And so when you're just talking in pure math, that's these pattern relationships. But when you are telling a story like about the Big Bang and the cosmic microwave background radiation and all that stuff, and then you insert mathematical formula into that, then you're using specific mathematical patterns to carry water for your story.
Yeah, and I think like where I would demarcate, where I wouldn't like, I think that modern cosmology is largely broken. It's kind of broken itself, right? Our measurement instruments, like some of the new space telescopes, are obviously putting a lot of pressure on our current theories. I look at a lot of these cosmological models not as lies but as fictions, right? Where it's a verisimilitude. It's as close as we can come to describing something based on what we currently can observe. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that like even something that is clearly probably not great physics like string theory, right? I think that there's probably some elements of an underlying reality that they are gesturing at. And so like I don't, maybe it's just because I'm not smart enough to make a judgment call there.
I think I get what you're saying, but like semiconductor physics, for example,
right? Okay.
Like we can build these stupid microchips because of semiconductor physics. Mm-hmm. So they like that. The story of semiconductor physics and the attendant mathematical formulations let us live stream this nonsense, right? So there's a practicality to that, and there's a reality to that,
right?
But
there's an engineering outcome.
Yeah, but the thing, our story about physics is, we'll just keep coming up with these stories, and that's a cool thing, even though it never comes to anything like string theory. Or we'll invent this creation story of the Big Bang, and we'll try and fit all of our observations into it to justify it. To me, it's lies, because there are just so many things in our modern civilization, culture, whatever. So much of it is built upon lies that are distracting us and destroying us. And maybe that's a bit extreme, and maybe fiction is a softer way of putting that. But to me,
well, but I think that we don't escape the problem of lies in truth telling ever. Because like to show my cards a little bit more, like I don't think that at any, unless you take like an equivocal view of language, like we're never describing with our language the thing in itself. Like we're like, language at some level is an artifice. It's fiction on top of a substrate of reality that we're just simply using the language, whether it's mathematical symbols or linguistic syntax to describe. We don't run outside of that problem. Like I don't think that like the problem of the lie disappears regardless of the frame of observation.
Well,
right.
Sure.
Okay, sorry guys. I'm gonna have to cut us off because we'll just keep going and then we'll step on Rigel. Also, I just want to say, YouTube, you're dumb. Because I just tried to text in here. I'm going to have to cut people off soon. Might not have time for final words. And it edited me. See, this is why AI, so far does not have intelligence. Because that's dumb. That's dumb. Learn how to interpret words like a human being. This was good. This was fun. I suggest, Paul Renee, maybe if you can clip like some of that math and physics stuff and use it on your Tinder. might get some swipes. You know what I mean?
Oh my god. Yeah.
I mean, that is
I
like,
think I think he should clip some of his jokes because he was pretty damn funny on this stream.
no, I mean, Paul Renee's got some riz, as the kids say. You know, he's got some swag.
For sure.
Yeah, well, all right. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm just gonna. There's no time for final words. This was good. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll do a Q&A sometime. Claire, I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all your questions that have absolutely jack shit to do with anything we're talking about. All right, that's all. Sorry, everybody. See you later. Until next time.
Paul, good to meet you. I appreciate
yeah,
what you were sharing there. And it made me think of Paul Firebend, whose book Against Method I like a lot. But thank you, Luke. This was great. I just wanted to say thank you all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Peace out, everybody.
Good to see you.
As I was walking down the street, a billboard caught my eye. The things that were upon it would make you laugh and cry. The board was torn and tattered from the storm the night before. The wind and rain had done its job, and this is what I saw.